Deeper and deeper they go, where it stops nobody knows. Hello and welcome to this week's review of My Hero Academia Season 6, Episode 2, Mirko, the number 5 hero. What do you think about this week's episode of My Hero Academia? Let me know in the comment section down below and you'll get read out on the show. And whilst you're there, be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do, because YouTube is increasing the scary place of small content creators. Support your local small content creator today, it will do them a power of good. Now, on to the review. Okay, so this week's episode, we're kind of just getting straight into it again, which, you know, I enjoy and I can appreciate. Between this week's episode and last week's episode, it doesn't feel like a single beat has been missed. It really is just going right into the action exactly where we left off, more or less. And whilst I did enjoy the episode as a whole, there's just a few issues here and there that I just kind of itch at the back of my mind ever slightly, but we'll get onto that shortly. As always, let us start off with the positives, and like I say, one of the things I do enjoy about this week's episode is the fact that it doesn't really miss a beat from previous week's episode. You could really watch these two episodes back to back as a double bill and not get a single dip in the pacing or the speed of events as you often get between TV shows. That is something that irritated the piss out of me when I tried watching Dragon Ball Super, where you get something really intense and high action and then you watch the next episode and then immediately the pace would just kind of deflate out the room and it was just a nightmare to deal with. We don't have that this week, thankfully, and I get a sense that this is going to be the case for the remainder of this part of the story arc, where things are going to be a lot more on and action-packed and a lot more quick than we might have otherwise got at another point in the series, if not in other series themselves. This is as my next point, I kind of feel that this bit of praise is a bit redundant, because, let's be honest, the animation is fantastic, but it more often than not is in My Hero Academia. This show really is a stellar piece of work to watch. It flows beautifully. I've never seen a single mistake, never a single moment where a character is the wrong colour or a bit of the animation isn't done properly. Everything looks great, everything looks fantastic, and it doesn't seem to have suffered at all given all the stuff that's been happening with the disease that shall not be named and such. It all looks fantastic. There are times watching it where it feels genuinely cinematic, especially with some of the action fighty sceney moments that we have, which take up the majority of this episode. I feel this episode has some really great and neat character moments. Not the best we've ever seen, but certainly some rather well-spirited, enjoyable stuff. I enjoy learning a bit more about Mirko. I think that she could have been a fairly one-note character. I am going to reserve judgment on her as a whole because I have a feeling she's just going to be a character that's going to appear now, be really cool and awesome, and just kind of fade away into the background. We're probably not going to get much of a backstory on her, but what we see of her in this episode is a lot of fun. She feels more like a traditional comic book hero, the kind that laughs in the face of danger and does their heroing with a smile in that almost traditional All Might kind of way. And they are a far more proactive hero than we see in most other superhero fictions and anime superhero stuff as I have seen it. It almost gets to a little bit meta at a certain point where in other kind of shows and other kind of narratives like this, you'd expect her to stop to let the villain do a monologue or enact their sinister master plan which will allow them to escape. We don't really get that with Mirko or whatever the name is. She's just on it constantly. She's going after this evil doctor guy like a dog with a bone. She's not letting up. And yeah, he does get the kind of drop on her and let out the Nomus, but you know that, well, we'll get into that in a little bit of a moment, but had she had a little bit more time to do it, yeah, this whole thing would just be wrapped up just like that. She's incredibly proactive, and to a certain degree, it almost breaks the flow of things in an interesting way, though I don't think we're ever going to get that with this kind of program, and certainly not going to get it in this story arc. And I also feel that the stuff that we got with Denki was neat. I've been wanting to see a little bit more of them, a little bit, get a better chance in understanding them, as up until this point they've kind of feel a little bit one note. They just kind of feel like a comic relief character, the kind that's goofy but well-intentioned, but they're also kind of a klutz. They're just there to be more or less a gag and to be almost the Yamcha of Class 1A. And whilst I did appreciate what we got to start in this episode, it does kind of feel a little bit undercooked, though I imagine that's mostly due to the fact we're probably going to see more of him over the next couple episodes or so and get a better understanding of them, especially bearing at this point that we've got the confirmation that he has feelings for Jiro, so all the fanfiction writers suddenly feel confirmed once again as yet another fan theory just seems to manifest itself in this program, and I'm not really sure what to think about that. Now we're going into the negatives, and Well, you know, as much as I enjoyed this week's episode, there are a few things I have issue with. Like, firstly, I don't think this week's episode is quite as strong as last week's. Last week's episode was a fantastic opener. It just really had this great sense of tension and anticipation, and just this feeling that anything could happen and that this could all fall apart, this could all be one big ambush, everything could just crash in on our heroes and get really deep, dark and depressing and really heavy, but we didn't get that. It's very early doors. Maybe all those things will happen by the end of this storyline, but here and now it's superhero action punchy time, and whilst I don't think this episode is as strong as last week's, I still think it's good. But if I'm going to end up looking back on this entire season in some kind of end of series review, which I honestly don't think I do because no one ever watches those bloody things, I probably won't rate this particularly highly as far as the best episodes are concerned. Again, not because I dislike it, but because it just doesn't feel as substantial as what we got last week. This week's episode feels more like connecting tissue between two parts more so than its own fully formed entity. This episode doesn't really feel like a much must-watch episode. Of course, you kind of have to watch it because it is just part of this particular narrative. It's not a filler episode, but again, I'm probably not going to look back at this as being an all-time classic. Again, I feel that Midoriya just feels kind of sidelined in this whole stuff. I get why that is the case, both in the terms of the narrative sense and the practical sense. In the more immediate in-world reason as to why that is the case, he has a powerful quirk, and thus the heroes are going to want to keep him in reserve for as long as possible, so that if something goes tits up, they can bring him out to save the day. They can press the Midoriya button and he'll beat up all the bad guys. I understand also why the writers are doing this, because probably at some point in the not too distant future, our heroes are going to get surrounded by the villains, things are going to look grim and nasty, and people are going to start getting hurt, and so Midoriya will have to race to save the day, and he'll be there right at the last minute just when you think things are going to get really, really, really bad, and he'll save people, probably at some costs, given how this show goes, but that's why it's happening. Like, in reality, they probably would have him towards... I don't know. I'm not even going to try and bring reality into this, because this is a superhero cartoon show. I'm not going to even try to tactically analyze all of this. If they're going to get into something I am kind of a little bit more annoyed at, and I am kind of hesitant to use this phrase, because I don't like trope talk. I find the whole TV tropes thing just kind of asinine and agitating for reasons just too lengthy to go through here, but boy oh boy, Dr. Evil Man sure has a lot of plot armor, doesn't he? I mean, sure, I get the idea of having plenty of contingency plans in place for in the off chance that he got discovered, and it does make sense in pressing the Nomu button and releasing them to try and save him and buying more time, but it does feel like a case of, okay, this should be over by now. He should be in prison, he should be captive, or at the very least we should capture him before something else comes along to save him. Like Tomura bursts out of his thing prematurely and starts zapping people to death or disintegrating them or whatever. But that doesn't feel like it's going to be the case. He's going to buy enough time to save himself, Tomura's going to get out, people are going to get hurt, and that's just the way it's going to be. It's going to feel like a standard thing. I very much can tell that this isn't going to be the case. You know, we're not going to catch Tomura early, and there's not even going to be a suggestion that they will do. He's just going to burst out of this thing in a couple episodes' time and cause havoc. When I think capturing him and then him breaking out probably would be more interesting. Like, imagine if they stuck him in Tartarus and then he escaped from there. That'd be interesting. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to have him escape from the test tube thing, his little microwave thing. But whatever, I get that's going to be the case, so I'm just preparing myself for disappointment. I think that as a whole entity, it was a fine episode. Not as good as last week's, like I said, but I still feel that in the grand scheme of things, this could have been far worse. We could have had an episode which felt more like filler, where nothing of substance really happened. An episode where the pacing was off and didn't quite feel on par with what we had previously, but that isn't the case. Yes, I have my issues with it, but I'll be honest, when episodes and storylines are this good, the criticisms start to feel a little bit more like nitpicking from my point of view, more so than they feel like a genuine discussion and analysis of the failings of it. Again, I feel that this episode is strong, but there's just things about it that kind of tickle in the back of my mind. Dr. Evil Man just feels like he's covered in plot armor when he probably should be captured by now, or alternatively, he gets captured and then something happens to release him, or Tomura gets let loose early. I think the stuff with Midori, he's just sidelined way too much, bearing in mind that it's supposed to be his story. And beyond that, yeah, I feel there's more positives than negatives with this thing. I don't think I've yet to come with an episode of My Hero Academia that I haven't liked. I'd have to go through previous seasons to find one that I didn't. But anyway, what did you think, dear listener? Did you enjoy this week's episode of My Hero Academia? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comment section down below, and we'll get back to you shortly, either directly in the comments themselves or towards the end of next week's video. While they are there, be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants you to do, and you can just do all that stuff. I don't really have anything else much to say, other than say thank you for listening, and goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!